Hey everyone, Aiden here with Six Figure Catering. Now, this video is going to be very interesting and I'm going to break down the best business to start in 2026, one that doesn't require any employees or any storefront, and basically it's just a streamlined version of the traditional restaurant model. So yeah, without any further ado, let's jump on in and talk about everything. So, what the business is called, it's called micro-catering. And basically what it is, you're selling one type of food, which is sandwiches, to one customer segment, which is offices, and you're ignoring everyone else, right? So you're not going after one-off people walking in the door like a traditional restaurant does, but you're going after big clients, right? So I'm talking about offices with 20 or more employees, right? An office that has 20 employees that orders lunch from my company, Convenient Catering, is going to spend on average about $260 after tax. So that's sort of like the baseline, right? And then we're going all the way up to big companies like this one right here that ordered food for 375 people and spent $5,800 with my company. We're looking at places like this office right here, where they ordered 150 of our build your own sandwich bars, which is one of the offerings that we do, and they spent 2,500. And then this one right here was another big office that ordered 200 of our classic box lunches, and they spent about $2,676 after tax, right? So the reason I was able to land big customers like this and get them coming back regularly is because I'm legitimately only focused on selling food to big offices. I don't worry about small offices. I don't worry about individual people. I don't try to cater weddings. I don't try to cater graduation parties. I try to cater office lunches every single day of the week, and that's how we make our money. So micro-catering looks a little bit like this when done correctly, right? So you can see me right here. We got, this was that big lunch that we did for 375 people. Here's a lunch we did for about 200 people. Here's a lunch for 135 people, right? So lots of big lunches coming in all the time because my only focus is convincing offices near me to place orders with me. And so what it comes down to is if you want to learn a little bit more about this business model, because this video I'm doing right now is just really surface level, sort of, explaining the very basics. But if you want to get a document that walks through why the business model works in much more detail, what our guide is called. It's called How I Made $22,000 Selling Sandwiches to Offices and How You Can Too. And just below this video, in the video description, you're going to see a little link to that. And if you want to just go in there onto that webpage, input your contact details, you're going to get access to that, and you're going to be able to see a lot more details about micro-catering and why I really, truly do believe this is the best business model to start in 2026. So what it comes down to, margins. This is a very important one. This is honestly the cornerstone of this business and why I believe it is better than any other food business and honestly any other business that you can start in 2026 just because the market's not saturated. Nobody knows about this yet. So what it comes down to, restaurants, so I asked ChatGPT and I was like, hey, what are the traditional what are the typical margins for a restaurant, a food truck, and a traditional catering company? And these were the numbers I got. So a typical restaurant, 3 to 5%. So they do $1 million in sales. The owner is probably going to keep between $30,000 and $50,000, right? Now, that being said, there are some caveats here, right? There are obviously restaurants that do super well. Like I know, for example, that Panda Express, they keep like 27% of sales, and they do billions of dollars of sales, right? So the owner of Panda Express is obviously an outlier making a lot of money. But most restaurants, especially independent restaurants where they have just one, maybe two locations, they're not keeping a lot of that money. Food trucks is a little bit better, looking at that 6 to 9%, but food trucks also do far less in volume, right? And so a food truck's not going to do typically $1 million in sales, right? But they're keeping about 6 to 9%. And then a traditional catering company, where they focus on doing events and weddings as opposed to catering for companies, they're looking at keeping about 7 to 8%. So to be completely honest, the margins for all the other types of food businesses out there are not great. And there are, of course, going to be outliers. And, you can tell me all day that you know a restaurant that does 20% margins, and that's fine. But that is the exception to the rule. Whereas a micro-catering business, the rule is you're going to keep 50 to 60% of the money you make. Now, why is that? That's because in micro-catering, the way I run my company, Convenient Catering, I'm the one employee, and we don't have high overhead. Our overhead is extremely low. So for a restaurant, right, a lot of their money goes to paying rent, and it's going to be between a couple $1,000s and upwards of $10,000, $20,000 a month, just depending on the size of the space, right? So I only spend about $245 a month to stay open in the shared space that I use, right? So I'm not paying $5,000 a month like I used to at my pizzerias that I owned. I'm only paying $245 a month. I also don't have any employees. I do all the work because the work is so minimal, it's just making sandwiches. There's very minimal prep that goes into it. Our cost of goods sold is super low. And so basically I'm able to go out and for an order, let's say we get a $2,000 lunch. I know that when I book a $2,000 lunch, I'm going to keep $1,200 as profit, right? Whereas a restaurant, if they book a $2,000 lunch, they might keep what, 5% of that? They might keep $100 as profit. So that's nothing, right? Now, that is why micro-catering is so powerful, because you are operating a very lean business, right? So basically, the sales that come in, you're able to keep a large chunk of them, whereas traditional food businesses, they have so much overhead, they have so many employees, they have ad costs, they have, they got to pay internet, they got to pay their phone service, they have so many different fixed costs that they're only able to keep a tiny fraction of what they make. Whereas with micro-catering, you're able to keep far more of the money. And so sort of building off that, right, why micro-catering works. So the corporate catering industry in 2025 was valued at about $77 billion. And this is an industry that's growing every year, right? So now, so sort of think about that. Why would that make sense? Because now more than ever, post-pandemic, offices, they're trying to get employees to come to the office. And the number one way they do that is by offering food, right? Because it's relatively cheap. You can buy lunch for an employee at like $12, $15 each, depending on, how much of a tip they leave, how much, what kind of food they're trying to get, right? In some places, it's a little bit higher. But generally, they can feed people at about $12 to $15 a person. And so there's a huge, enormous opportunity at all the big offices in town. And when you position yourself as a reliable partner, it becomes very easy to capture that business. And so this is what I talk about. This is what I do in my own business. And I firmly believe that in 2026, you can 100% take a very simple business model, go out, start networking your business, get customers by doing one-on-one networking, get customers by sending out mailers, do customers by running ads on Google, by cold calling, car dealerships, other businesses that are open, by targeting universities. There's so many ways that we have to get customers for a micro-catering business. And the best part is you don't need that many customers to win. I had very few customers last year in my business, and we made a huge profit. And so that's what it comes down to, my friends. So if you like what you heard in this video, you think micro-catering sounds like an interesting business to get into, then what I want you to do is go below in the description of this video and download the guide, that how I made $22,000 in a month selling sandwiches to offices. And that's going to have more details about micro-catering. And it's going to answer some of the questions that this video probably brought up. So go to that right now. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them in the comments below, and I'll get back to you soon. All right, take care, my friends.